Hello and welcome to RIPTIDE Afterparty, the party where everyone is welcome. In fact, I'm the one who's welcome because I'm at RIPTIDE HQ. I'm in a little studio. I'm quite impressed with this place, actually.
Welcome.
Thank you. The person welcoming me is Justine Colla, who helps with marketing for RIPTIDE. Mm-hmm. And has very politely offered to give me her time today. Because I thought, because you've got a really interesting background, it crosses into a lot of different areas, but they all tie back into the business side of RIPTIDE and marketing and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get some time with you, really. But my very first question, before we even detail your history, is the same question I asked TK Cooper when I interviewed him.
Okay.
Why the hell would you give up Antipodean weather for the UK?
Well, I'm actually the worst Australian ever. I hate the heat, I hate beaches, and I hate sand. So I thought, what better to come to the UK, which is dreary and rainy. And I mean, I loved winter back home, but I've discovered that winter at home is actually autumn here. Mm-hmm. And now I understand why everybody's favourite month here is autumn, because I thought it was winter. Mm. And then winter here was like a whole new thing I wasn't prepared for.
Whereas, you see, my partner, she's from Buffalo, New York, where the snow regularly gets up to your waist level. Yeah. So at winter here, she just laughs off. It's a joke for her.
I don't think I could deal with that much now. I had a shoulder injury because I slipped on the ice while drunk and had a strained rotator cuff and compressed joint, which is when the bone rubs up against each other. So, not a fan of the ice. I like the snow, but now I'm terrified of the ice now.
Oh. 2 RIPTIDE shows ago, I slipped over when I was drunk and broke my elbow. So it happens to the best of us.
I actually heard that story through the aforementioned TK Cooper.
Yes. What a great thing that he was walking by. Right, so you decided to come to England, and we will circle back to that. Mm-hmm. I really want to get into your background a little bit, because I only know a little bit about you, Justine, but you've done several things that I think tie in really nicely into what you're doing at RIPTIDE now. So, for example, you've definitely got a background in art. I mean, you made the front page of Reddit with a picture, so...
Well, front page of Squared Circle.
Well, I mean, that's good enough.
It would be nice if it was a front
are there
page
other Are there other Reddit pages?
Well, nah.
but you are an artist. You do pictures. Preferred medium, painting, drawing?
Digital art. Mm-hmm. But I haven't done art for a while, actually. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to start to get back into it. So I've just been sketching stuff recently. But I think probably my most well-known art was the CrossFit Jesus art. So if you literally Google CrossFit Jesus, I think the second photo is a painting of Seth Rollins as Jesus, as if it would be up on your, like, grandma's wall or something above the mantelpiece. Yeah. And, that was me.
Wonderful. Did you have any sort of preferred artists or background in it, other than just drawing yourself?
So, funnily enough, the artist that got me into continuing to do art, because I feel like I've always picked up a lot of kind of, like, I did music for a bit when I was in school, and then I did art, and I did all singing for a bit, and then dancing for a bit, but I always, like, was really good at the first, like, the beginner's lessons, and then as soon as I hit the intermediate lessons, it would suddenly get really hard, and I would end up just I'd lose interest and not want to do it anymore. But for some reason with art, I found this artist online called Charlie Bowater on DeviantArt, and I just thought she was amazing, and I listened to this stream of hers, and someone asked, how did you get so good, because she's self-taught, and she said, I just drew until I bled, like my hands bled, sorry, and I was like, in my head I was like, that's how I need to get good, I just got to keep drawing until my hand starts to bleed. So I literally just used to draw so much when my I've got this massive, like, it's kind of going down now actually, but it was like a massive kind of welt, I guess you'd say, on my finger. And that was just because I would just draw until my hand, like, literally just hurt so much. I think one time I, like, broke the skin a little bit while I was, like, drawing, because the tablet pen is rubber, so it kind of does grind down. Anyway, I now work with her, which was kind of why my current job at Adam Hawk was a bit of my dream job. And when they offered it to me, I, like, took it immediately, because being able to meet and work alongside the person who got me into art in the first place was a huge, like, I don't know, it just felt very validating for me to, like, get to a point where I could do that. But in terms of, like, favourite artists of all time, I would say John Singer Sargent, who's a portrait artist.
Did he do Portrait of Madam X? Maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's that really beautiful, she's in that, like, it's a very dark background and she's in a black dress, and then she's perfectly turned so you can see her profile, and she's got this very delicate profile, and it's that one's a really famous one.
Yeah.
There's also another portrait he's done, which is in the Edinburgh Gallery. If you're in that area, it's free to go see, so why not?
I have been there, so perhaps I did.
And then he also has a couple in the Portrait Gallery of London, but they're not like famous ones. They're but they're still absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's why I know the famous one. I'm the sort of art philistine. I know one painting from lots of painters. I go, oh, it's good, that, isn't it? Yeah. So you got the interest in art, and it's. I mean, that's literally affected your life then. If it's affected the sort of job you take and where you travel to, that's pretty amazing. And so I suppose sticking with the business side, you've got a history of working with business with games development and VR.
Yes. So I actually started out in art as a game artist. So art really does tie into everything.
Yeah.
And then I worked with this company, and I ended up moving to Melbourne, and I was working remotely still as an artist, but because it was a very small team, and because the rest of the team was in Sydney and we didn't have a producer, sometimes they'd be like, Justine, can you make this thing? And I'm like, cool. And then like 3 hours later, I'm like, I finished it. And then they'd be like, hey, we changed the whole game idea. And I'm like, cool. I wasn't there for any of those conversations. So, and around the same time, my CEO was like, couldn't figure out, that when I was emailing people, I would get responses back so quickly. And it was literally just because I'm not emotionally unavailable, and I write kindly, I guess, in emails, whereas he was just like, hello, need this thing, and then his name, and it would be that succinct. And so he just kind of said, how about we try and put you in marketing? And I had no experience in marketing at this point. You know, I'm getting paid on a salary. I think it was my first salary job, and they just said, okay, we're going to move you into this thing that you have no idea about, and you've got, you know, he like looked at the budgets for the year, and he said, I'm going to give you 6 months to teach yourself how to be a marketing person.
Wow.
Pretty much. So I started out with like, I was like the point of call for like emails, and then I was doing a bit of social media, and really at this time, this is before my own social media blew up, so I think I'd been doing some Tumblr stuff at the time, so I kind of understood social media, but definitely not in the way that I do now. And then we went to like PAX, which is a video game convention.
Penny Arcade one?
Yeah. And they were like, I had to like organize the exhibition, and then they sent me the media list. I was like, what is this list? And they're like, oh, this is a list of all the journalists and stuff who are going to be there. Which is like, if you know anything about PR, that's like one of the first things you learn. And I'm like 4 months into teaching myself, and I'm like, what is this list? And I'm like, what? They just send that to people? I'm like, that sounds amazing. Why didn't I know about this before? And yeah, learned all about that stuff. And I even did like some recruitment with them as well, because we were hiring some interns and some juniors. And I have always felt like, you know, gender equality in the workplace is really important. And so and it was pretty much, except for me, it was an all-male team. So when we did get some girls into the office, you know, I really tried to take them under my wing and make sure that they were being accommodated, and I didn't feel like they were in the dark about anything. I kind of found that sometimes they didn't tell everyone the whole story, when sometimes it would be nice for them to just know context about things. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so during that time, we made a brand new company with the exact same people that were in the old company, and then we started applying to innovation accelerators with this like VR prototype that we had, which was awesome. And then we got into one, and then I learned a bunch of stuff about business, because that's what they teach you at business accelerators. You don't actually need to know anything. They're just looking for people with cool ideas to teach them how to get into business.
So this is all pretty interesting, because to me it sounds like, and we've only covered your art and your business side so far, but it sounds like you're doing what a lot of wrestlers do, which is sort of diving in, teaching yourself your artistic side, your wrestling side, so to speak, but also the business side, how to generate income, how to market yourself and so on. So it's just an interesting parallel to, I suppose, any sort of entertainment or self-promoting business.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And it's why I say, like, sometimes I get very, like, on my Twitter, I might just stand on my soapbox a bit about things. And it's mainly just because a lot of people who start off in wrestling are so young, and they haven't had an opportunity to kind of go through the things that I've gone through. And I think I have a lot of very applicable knowledge to wrestling. So I'm always like, wrestlers, my DMs are open, and like, yeah, sometimes they bite, and I like have conversations with people. And you know, there's a girl back in Australia who is this really amazing wrestler, Avery.
I have heard the name, actually.
Yeah, she was going to come to the UK. It unfortunately didn't happen, but she asked me for advice on how to promote herself. And I said, you should get a show reel. And she didn't know what a show reel was. And, like, that's fine. I'm not laughing because, like, oh, my God, how silly is she? Yeah. Just because, of course, she doesn't know. She was, like, 20 or 21 at the time, and all she's been doing all her life is wrestling, and I think she was doing bartending at the time. So how else would she have known about a show reel? And we found someone else to put the show reel together, and then it went out, and then she ended up getting a whole bunch of attention, and then I think she got some bookings in the UK before she even went, and then I don't know whether the interest was the reason why she went to Stardom, or if Stardom was already having a look at her, but she ended up going to Stardom, and now she's gone to Stardom and done stuff in Japan, and now she's come back to Australia, and she's a much bigger deal back in Australia than she was. And, you know, it just came from a little bit of just good promotion of yourself, and it's so much better than to just post a photo with some dates on it and be like, I'm coming to this country, book me. Like, show yourself, show the reasons why people are missing out on you.
That's great. Well, I mean, I suppose, obviously it is a wrestling podcast, we're here for Riptide, but can we dive into a little bit? What got you interested in wrestling? How did you get involved in the Australian side of things before you came here? I
always thought wrestling was a really dumb thing.
Get out! This interview's over.
And it wasn't until an ex-boyfriend of mine, I think we played a wrestling video game, and I thought the Royal Rumble match was quite palatable, and we ended up watching. I think it's actually, I mean, it's Royal Rumble today, isn't it? When we're filming this, so I think it's actually my like 5-year anniversary of being a wrestling fan. But yeah, it was Royal Rumble 2015. I'd seen a little bit of the Money in the Bank match 6 months previously, and I recognized Seth as like, oh, he was the cute one with the blonde streak. So when he had his match against Lesnar and John Cena, I think it was the first time I had someone to back, I had a bit of context, and the storytelling of the match itself was really, really good. Yeah. And so kind of all those things coming together, it was a very much like, oh, is this what wrestling is moment? And it kind of took me by surprise, and I realized it was all about characters and storylines and not two big dumb dudes punching each other, which sometimes wrestling is, and some people like that, and that's fine. But for me, I always struggled. Like, it always just seemed like a boys thing to me. I mean, it was weird. I never thought games were a boys thing. I was playing games from a very, very young age, so I don't think I ever had the thing where I felt like it was a gendered thing until I very much got into high school, and I was like, wow, I'm like the only girl in my peer group who plays games. Okay. But yeah, with wrestling, definitely and I really was like so undereducated about it. And that's when I think about when I tell my friends now, and they're like, oh no, wrestling's not for me. I'm like, it's not because it's not for you. You just don't understand it. You don't understand that it's theater, and you don't understand that it's like love and betrayal and all these things. It's film. It's so many different things. It's not just fake sports. And it's figuring out how to open people's minds up to it enough so that they will see that, and then they can decide whether they like it or not. Yeah, so I got into it, and I got into it fast because I joined a Tumblr community, and we just started making heaps and heaps and heaps of fan art, and I just had so much inspiration to draw. I think I just drew like hundreds upon hundreds of pieces of like Sasha Banks and Seth Rollins and Neville. And then at the same time, my career was actually blowing up. So this was around the same time that I had been put into marketing, and I was going into the Startup Accelerator, and I was starting to earn a lot of networks and rise very quickly in the games industry of what I was doing in Australia at the time. And then I think it was a couple years on, I moved back to Sydney, and then I moved back to Melbourne. I moved around a bit, but when I settled back in Melbourne, I started going to indie shows there. And I think the other thing was like, I thought indie shows was like going to be a laugh, and it was amazing. It was better than what I was seeing on WWE. I'd never seen an intentional like juicing spot before. And they had a couple of those in the show that I went to go see. And I saw a guy do a swanton dive from the top of a ladder into a table. And I was like 3 rows away from that. And I was just like, what? Oh my God, this is happening right here. Like in my local area. I couldn't believe it. So I really got into indie wrestling after that. And then I also realized that the experience that I had in marketing, and I guess kind of the experience that I had selling video games and selling interactive experiences, I was like, wow, this is kind of missing from my area. And I felt like I could help out some of my local promotions if they were interested with some marketing advice and whatnot. And it didn't happen for some. Some very much still saw me as a fan. There were some promoters that were not the best of people, you'd say.
Sure.
Usually kind of more out in the rural areas that would like underpay people, and I definitely didn't want to work with any of those people. But yeah, then Underworld came along, and I was there on the ground floor since before it was announced. I was part of the announcement strategy, and we did a Kickstarter, and I helped manage and execute that. Our kind of community strategy, I think it was kind of a big deal at the time, because I don't think any other company had really had that much kind of international buzz at the time. And, and a lot of that was, I was using a lot of my own personal contacts who liked me and wanted to support me as a person, who I'd made friends with internationally, who were sharing my stuff. And that's how it kind of got out so far. But there had been no one really in the Australian scene at the time who had as much kind of global reach, you'd say, on their social media, who wasn't a wrestler as I did. So I think when the whispers about Underworld started happening, everyone was just like, oh, this thing will just, it'll be announced and then no one will really care about it. And anyway, it got announced and a lot of people actually really cared about it. And I think it took some people by surprise. And it was very much a feel-good moment for myself, because there were a lot of people who didn't want me to quote-unquote jump the barrier. And it turns out that actually I could be very helpful. And it wasn't because I want an ego rub or anything. It's because I genuinely love wrestling, and I want more people who are like me, who thought wrestling was stupid, to come and see a show and fall in love with it as well. And it's such a creative, inspiring medium. And then, so that was my Australian experience. And then obviously I came to the UK and things changed.
Well, I'm going to bring that up in a second, but I just want to, with the Underworld Wrestling, I don't know if it's down to yourself or a group collective effort, but it seemed to have a brilliant sort of PR pitch along the lines of, there's an underground fighting community in Melbourne, and you have to... it sounds very theatrical in a good way, like creating a whole experience out of it, not just a regular show you just walk into. Is that something you contributed towards?
I didn't contribute to it creatively, but it definitely helped. That was originally the idea before I came on board.
Okay.
And that was something that really interested me to get involved, because I was like, wow, I hadn't heard of a company that kind of had an existing storyline before it even started up. It was cool that Underworld began filming during the middle of its story, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it had so much context, and I was like, this is so much easier to sell than come down to the new wrestling show and we've got a weird spooky black and red theme, but actually being able to pitch it as underground wrestling Fight Club has existed in Melbourne for 200 years. And you didn't know about it, but just now it's opened its doors and you can be one of the first of the public to come and see it. It was a really cool pitch to tell people, and it's so much better to grab someone's attention. And whether they're going to come or not, the fact is that they're not just going to be like, oh, I don't want to come to that because I don't like wrestling, it's not for me. Suddenly it's just oh, this is this exclusive thing that you can come check out. Suddenly people are like, okay, it just sits in their brain a little bit longer. And it was filmed by a friend of mine, actually, who I'd met from games. So it was kind of, when you start out something that's very small, very much like Riptide, you're pooling your resources from your past experience and your past lives or whatever. Yeah. And it was cool to just have people that I had met through games who also were interested in wrestling to come and work and help out with Underworld. I think it was just it was just a nice validation of wrestling is, to work in wrestling, you don't have to be a wrestler, or you don't have to be an ex-wrestler. You don't have to be some wrestler's child or whatever. It's like it is possible, even though it is so closed doors, it is possible to like get in, and I think it's better for it to work with professionals who have different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's as I said at the start, it's kind of why I wanted to get you on the podcast, is because I think you've got such a varied background, but it all sort of interlocks together to put you where you are now. I think that's
exactly.
fascinating. I think it's kind of what not just wrestling, but any industry needs to move forward. Is people with different backgrounds coming together and going, "Hey, why don't we try something different?" I think you've got that in spades, which is why it's really fascinating having you down here. It's all right. I've got to ask as well, just with sticking with Australia for 1 second. I believe you had the nickname Cruiserweight Mum.
Oh yeah.
Come on now.
So, kind of just before I left Tumblr, I had gotten really into 205 Live. I loved 205 Live. Mm-hmm. This was even before Neville was on it, and for anyone listening who doesn't already know, Neville/Pac is like my favourite wrestler of all time, and I'm really annoying about him, and I talk about him all the time. And before he was on 205 Live, I'd already been calling all these guys my sons. Mm-hmm. As a joke, because they're just so cute and flippy, and I love them, and I just wanted them to succeed, and I felt so maternal over all these wrestlers. But I really thought that, you know, while people weren't watching it because they thought it was crap, they were telling some really great storylines, and you were watching these wrestlers grow into these characters, like actually from show to show, you were watching this happen. Anyway, and on Tumblr, I think I just I was like, my question thing is open, and then someone sent me a question that said, since you're basically the cruiserweight mum, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, that's great. I'm taking that one. And so it wasn't self-proclaimed. Someone did give me that nickname.
Yeah, no one can have a nickname they get themselves. It doesn't work.
But it was great. Like, I think the thing with 205 Live is like, wrestlers, especially wrestlers in WWE, there are definitely some like actual celebrities in wrestling. Mm-hmm. But I think wrestling in general, like, they're so much more accessible. They're definitely famous. But if you reply to them on Twitter, there's actually a chance that you'll get a response. Mm-hmm. And that's why I got really addicted to doing all the fan art, because if I drew a fan art of Ariana Grande, there's no way she's reposting my fan art. But Charlotte did, and Sasha Banks did, and Finn Balor did. And like that, I just got really addicted to drawing fan art and getting retweets from wrestlers. Mostly because I'd get a bunch of followers after it happened. And like that's how I grew my my Twitter following really, really quickly, because it was just like I was just doing all this fan art and getting the retweets and getting my reach out there. Yeah, and then the cool thing was that, like, some of them started to follow me on Instagram and stuff. And it was just really nice to feel like... It was nice to feel how appreciated as I was as a fan.
It's pretty interesting because you, as you've said earlier, you're pretty open to answering DMs on Twitter. And you, in fact, had a Q&A just the other day. Mm-hmm. And you were asked about how could fans get involved in helping out with wrestling. And I thought you made a really, really good answer about you shouldn't, if you're just a fan who just wants to be involved, to do any old thing. Do you think that contradicts slightly what you're saying about doing the Instagram art and getting in that way?
It always, like, that specifically comes from when I first got into video game development college. Because when I was in there, I discovered that making video games is a very different beast, you'd say, than playing video games. Yeah. And we had a lot of people in my class that didn't have any other passions or interests or skills. All they had was that they played a lot of video games. And so, you know, they're like, oh, what are you going to do when you go to college? Oh, I guess I'll just make video games because I love playing video games. And it doesn't work like that, because creating video games is a business, it's a process. It's the same as enjoying watching wrestling and putting on a wrestling show. It's the exact same. They're very, very similar things. There was this one guy, and he was just on the Aeon forums all day during class. And I was just like, you're never going to get a job in games if you're on the Aeon forums all day. There's no way. And he just didn't pay attention. And then he would get kind of upset when, you know, he wasn't getting good marks, or he wasn't doing this, wasn't doing that. And like, of course that guy never got a job in games. And I don't know where he is. He's probably off
Playing games.
Playing games. And so I think that experience really stuck with me, which was like enjoying something and creating something of two different things. And making video games involves a lot of dedication and a lot of perseverance and a lot, because it's very, you know, it's especially in Australia, there are not a lot of opportunities to work in games. I worked in games for free for 2 years before I got my first paid job.
Yeah.
And it's the same with wrestling. I don't think people really understand how much of a business it is. And, you know, you kind of get into working in wrestling and it's just like, oh, this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. It's just a lot of hard work and a lot of money and, you know, a lot of the relationships that you have with the wrestler as a fan is different to the relationship you have with wrestlers as a crew member and as a booker.
Yeah.
And I think with wrestling being so closed doors, the reality of how not fun it is behind the curtain doesn't really exist. And I think a lot of people think it's a lot easier than it actually is. So everyone's, and I mean, like, everybody watches a WWE show and they're like, oh, this is crap. Why they do this? Why they do this? I could do this better. I could do this better. And like, sure, say for example, the camera work that day was really crap. Yeah. And you'd be like, this sucks. Why didn't they do this better? Well, maybe you have no idea. Maybe earlier that day, the director of photography broke his arm or came down sick and had to go to the hospital, and then someone who's in a lower stasis has to pick up the pieces and just try and get it to work. I think that's what I realized when I got into wrestling. It was just like, if I've had the ability to be a professional in wrestling, it's because I have so much context and understanding of what it was like working in video games. They're two very similar, underappreciated artistic mediums that are beloved by many, 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 many people. And it's crazy that video games make so much money and so many people play video games, but governments don't consider it an art form. There's not a lot of funding. There's also not a lot of understanding in the gamers, and I think wrestling fans as well. There's not enough or a lot of understanding about how difficult everything is, and that's just an issue of they don't have any context. They've been kept in the dark about this process. So I don't know if that answered your question. It's hard because it's like there's so many things. It's hard to explain everything in like a 1 hour podcast.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. From my perspective, I guess that sounds like people focus on the show and forget the business in show business.
Yeah, and I think now when I see things. When I see things that happen at wrestling shows and I'm like, oh, I wish they did that better, it's always a question about efficiency. It's a question about how good people are as managers. It's never about how good of a creative person you are, which is obviously important, but it's less important than how good are you as a manager, how efficient are you at getting stuff together. Because if you're just creative, that's very expensive. If you're creative and not efficient, you're going to be throwing money at things to try and fix things. And if you don't have that money to throw things to fix things, you're going to have a lesser product. Yeah, I think I would say I've really talked down. And I don't want to talk it down. I just want people to be realistic.
Yeah.
I want people, if they really want to get into developing video games, if they really want to get into working in the wrestling industry, they need to be prepared for it not to be a fairy tale. I think the wrestling business could do the fans a bit more justice to help them understand how difficult it really is and to prepare people a little bit better if they're interested in getting into it. But I would always say never get into wrestling if you're just like, I want to get in no matter what. Whatever, like if you say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you're just like, I just want to work in wrestling. Like you'll genuinely end up getting taken really advantage of, and you might even be abused by people just because if you'll always do something no matter what just to be part of something, of course you're going to be taken advantage of. Because a nice promoter, for example, will be like, that's great, but I don't think you're the right fit. But there will be someone somewhere who will see someone who can be taken advantage of. And who will be able to do work for free and who can do all these monkey jobs and who's the scapegoat to get yelled at when it all goes wrong. I didn't start working in wrestling until I had like 7 or 8 years experience in game development. and half of that was art and half of that was marketing. And I think by the time I started working in wrestling was the same time I could sit down in an interview with a game development company and run that interview. I remember someone was interviewing me and I sat down, I was like, what are your pain points? And they're like, oh, we need this and this. I'm like, cool. You can't afford me full time, but you can afford me for 6 weeks. And this is what I can do for you in 6 weeks. And they just looked at each other and they were like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, until you can do that in your field, it's not worth getting into wrestling. Because you have to back yourself.
Well, this is precisely why I wanted to open this interview with discussing your history in Australia and your sort of your skill sets.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I saw your tweet, basically, so I guess I led you in with this question. But I agree completely. I wouldn't say I work in the wrestling industry, but it's not enough to just turn up and be a fan, because you need to be bringing something to the table, and that will come from real life experience in other areas.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah. And I think if you're just, I think I mentioned this, but I didn't really go too much into it, but if you're going in and like, I'll do anything, let me do anything, and go, okay, you can be part of ring crew, which is kind of a bit disparaging to ring crew, because ring crew is a very important job in itself, because setting up the ring and making sure that's done correctly is directly tied to the safety of the performers. But of course you can like help bring a beam in or, things like that. But if you've just kind of like pulled, I guess you'd say, a fan off the street who's like has these rose-coloured glasses on and doesn't have a lot of context about this, and I think doesn't yet respect the talent as people who are contracted to work this show, people who need space to, they're getting there early and they're figuring out their matches and they're figuring out where if lunch is there or where they're getting lunch, or if they need to tan or if they need to do all this. There's a lot of things that's going through the wrestlers, and the most important thing is their 20-minute performance later on that night. And I think that process starts for wrestlers really, really early in the day to get themselves in the headspace to have the best match that they can. And if you have some random fan that's been brought in to do ring crew and they're going up to them and go, hi, like, oh my God, I love you so much. And just like, and you're taking time away from the talent to prepare to have their match. And that actually could affect their performance later in the night. Yeah. And, as much as I am a fan and I love to like, be part of shows and I see everyone walking around, I very rarely talk to talent. I am running around taking photos for social media or setting up merch or organising, or we had a video crew doing PR stuff at Brighton Spirit, and I was just managing them.
I remember,
the entire time, and it's just like I barely talked to anyone, and I would want it to be that way. I would rather talent see me as just someone who's just running around being busy and contributing to the show, rather than someone who just hangs around and makes small talk.
Oh, I see you're picking on me now. Actually, I won't peel the curtain back too much, but I will add, speaking only for myself, one of the reasons Riptide were happy with me doing this podcast is because I don't hang around and gosh darn it and rosy-cheeked and ask for photographs and try and force my way into small talk with the wrestlers. I leave them, they're professionals, they're there to do a job. I'm leaving them to it. You need to approach it as a business, even if you're not the one making the money out of it. Other people's careers rely on it. So
exactly.
You need to respect that.
It's something I really love about Riptide, which is every part of that, having enough time during the day and being well supported. We've said that there's a physio and a barber backstage, and it's like all that stuff is normal for like a bigger brand, but it's obviously very expensive and a lot more difficult the smaller and smaller you get as a business. I've heard horror stories of like talent getting picked up at the airport and having 20 minutes in the car to figure out their match with someone. Yeah. Like, I just like, no, like these people. I mean, I'm not saying if you threw a wrestler into a match and you said, do something, that it wouldn't be great. But it's only as great as the support that you've given them to put on that performance. And the better it is during the day that they're there and preparing for this match, the better the match is going to be. And them being supported and them not feeling like they're going to have to politely deal with, people asking for things. And like, I'm not trying to disparage the fans here, because...
we're all fans, or we wouldn't have even taken the step in the door.
Exactly. I'm not, those dirty fans who come in just like, annoy the wrestlers and whatnot. Like, it's not about that. Of course they do that. if I got invited backstage at WWE, I'd want to, I'd want to go find Sasha and be like, oh my God, I love you.
Yeah.
But, when you're hired to do something, you have to respect that taking up someone else's time could affect the quality of the performance, and therefore that affects, how good the show is, and how the quality of the show directly affects how many people want to sign up for the VOD. And the more people sign up for the VOD, the easier it is to put on more amazing shows with a lot more creative energy into it. So I think it's just like, it's all a very big, intricate machine, and everything needs to work perfectly, but it's very difficult because wrestling is, oh, hello, Ren. Sorry, the house cat has just made her
the
grand
true
entrance.
CEO of the business.
Yeah. Ren.
This is just what listeners want to hear. Well, spinning off of that, these are kind of two questions in one, really. So bear with me. But what would you say your role in Riptide is currently, and what would you say your hopes are for either Riptide's development or even the British indie scene as a whole? What are you doing, and what are you hoping to get to do?
I guess in Riptide, my role is just everything I've learned in games. I try to pass on everything I've learned to the Riptide team, because they're mostly their background's music.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have a background that's also in a kind of like similar creative field that has a different kind of perspective from a different business is really super valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing that. I don't know a huge amount about business, but I can pass on what I do know about it.
Mm-hmm.
My real job is a marketing manager. So I definitely help out with some marketing stuff with Riptide, and, I can work Photoshop. So if they need me to do some backup graphics when Brett's not available, I'll throw something together, not as good as him. And, I've been trying to run the merch stuff at shows because there hasn't really been anyone who's been able to kind of focus on merch, and it's been nice that since I've been doing that, like the little merch area is just getting a little bit cuter and cuter each time, and then each show will make a little bit more on it, so that's fun. But yeah, and I think just kind of coming up with, really talking with the team about like, where do we want to go, and then trying to figure out a strategy of how to get there. Mm-hmm. I guess, I say I'm in marketing, but it's hard to define my role. Mm-hmm. I guess I would be Riptide helper thingy. I don't know. Whatever I have that's applicable, I'm trying to contribute, because I really care about Riptide, and it was my favorite company. When I was working with Underworld, I was looking at Riptide, and I used to, it's so funny, like Josh didn't even, I told him this, because I would do social media on show day, but I just used to copy paste what Riptide was doing on their show day tweets, and I would just slightly change it 30% so they wouldn't figure it out. And he was like, wow, you did that? That's so cool. I'm so flattered. And I was just like, oh. I was really looking to Riptide as just I guess a big brother figure, I think, a bigger sibling. And that's how me and Josh started talking, which was, I was looking for advice about some stuff that I was doing at Underworld, and, where am I going to go to? I'm going to go to the place where I have the most respect for, which was Riptide. And then it was cool to come over here and then meet the team, and then to move here for work, and then to become more of an integral part of the team. And it's been really, really great experience being part of it. Kind of from the experiences that I'd had back in Australia and the experiences that I have here, especially backstage, it was just I'm really impressed by how much Riptide cares about the welfare of the talent. I was really, really impressed by that. And I'm just really impressed with the creative vision and not putting out something they think is crap. Mm-hmm. I love knowing that the very first Riptide show was completely filmed and never released because it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
I would say Josh's kind of quality assurance is very, very impressive. Mm-hmm. And that's why I kind of really wanted to be part of the team. Or it's more just we would have conversations, and I would just be there's here's something I can here's something from my past which I've learned about that could be really helpful here. And then it's just more and more, and then suddenly it was I was kind of part of the team. But where I'm hoping Riptide will go, I'm sure it's been talked about everywhere, but BritRes has kind of, I wouldn't say recession, but it kind of is a recession in the last year and a half. A lot of the resources that independent companies had access to has been kind of taken away. And there are new rules in place, and, you know, it's all kind of managing that and working around that. So, and I also think I've seen a bit of a rift between the BritRes fandom and shows themselves. Whether there's just felt like there's been a bit of a betrayal, or, you know, I don't know where that kind of like... It feels like the fans feel hurt. Mm-hmm. The greatest advice I've ever heard was, when people put their energy into something, that's when you start making money. And it just feels like people are kind of taking their energy out of BritRes a bit. And when that happens, there's less money in the overall pot to go around, and it makes things more difficult. And it just means that you see in 2020, hopefully listening to this in 2022 or 2023, this was just this doesn't get worse, obviously. But you'll see that a lot of shows are running smaller venues, or they're running less shows in the year. And I'm just hoping that these wrestling companies are able to kind of build that respect back with the fan base, build that trust back with the fan base. Not to say... It's not saying, like, build that respect so we can get their money back. It's nothing to do with that. It's just about the best money that you get from an audience is money that is given with love, is given with care. And that's the most valuable income that you can get. And it's really up to the... Like, I wish the fans could know. It's really up to them, like, whether BritRes fails or succeeds. Only so much can be made on tickets. You know, it needs to be about subbing. It needs to be about buying merch. It needs this. So yeah, it's very difficult. It's a big ask to ask fans to trust you. It's a big ask to ask fans to give you their energy and to give you their money, because it's hard to prove to them that you deserve it. And a lot of business owners don't think that way. They think that they're entitled to it. And I think that's what I love about Riptide is working with Tom and Josh, is that, you know, they don't feel entitled to anything. And a lot of the decisions, I guess a good one is the pack surprise. You know, I think we still had like 15 or 20 tickets left. You know, but giving the audience the gift of that surprise was far more important than the sellout. And God, what a surprise it was. Like, the energy in that room was just like and you know, I feel like that money has made itself back by being able to put up the match. When people talk about Riptide, that's the match that they share. So, you know, the 20 or so tickets that we lost out on in money has made itself back in more in you'd say social capital and a lot of PR value. And I think it's just weighing up really what's more important. I just think I'd like to see... I just hope BritRes repairs itself. I'm sure you'd love me to say Brighton Dome, or, like, you know, we're running like 1,000 people venues, but I just don't think BritRes as a foundation is able to support that right now.
Well, actually, my hope was, or is, and I think you're already doing it anyway, is just for better representation, which is something you're very outspoken about on social media, and I think it's great. And I think my hope for the future is just more widespread representation and more trying something new, which more sort of traditional promotions aren't doing. But that would be my hope for I guess Riptide as a whole, is just to keep going in the direction they're going.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that too. When I think we talked about it, you know, I talked about it with Josh recently, which was like when I first found out about Riptide, I really thought of it as an intergender promotion, because it seemed like something that they were really kind of marketing. And now that, you know, intergender's like happening quite a lot, especially in a lot of American promotions. It's, you know, it's kind of a lot of people are doing intergender stuff these days, and it seems to be there always seems to be less of that, you know, domestic violence conversation, which is not a real reason to dislike intergender wrestling, because it's two people consensually agreeing to be in a theatrical match. But that's a whole other podcast in itself. And now it's just like, whether or not it's the best PR decision, I don't think Riptide wants to promote itself as a intergender promotion or a hyper-inclusive promotion, because I think what it wants to promote is how normal it is.
Yes.
And the best thing is that the Riptide fans have been accustomed from day one, if you say anything homophobic or whatever, you'll get thrown out.
Yeah.
And so anyone who would ever be a bad fan already knows not to come to Riptide. And the people who are at Riptide are kind of like either new fans or other fans who feel like they may be not catered to. And I guess you'd say more like promotions that have been doing the same thing for many years. And they're definitely harder fans to find, but easier fans to hang on to, because they respect you a lot once they feel catered to. And yeah, I think it's really important for... And Riptide are doing the absolutely most, like, hardest thing, in my opinion, which is, like, to really keep the integrity of the foundations of wrestling and the technical aspects of wrestling with good matchups. Like, really good matchups of it just being intergender. And I think, Riptide does try very hard to make sure that the booking makes sense and everyone... Yeah, and that... And, like, not only is that just good business... It's great for the wrestlers as well. It was amazing. I think a great example is like Club Tropicana made their debut, and they were put in a match with Birdlaw, which is Speedball and Vader. And people talk about it was one of some people's favourite match of the entire. And when you think about the other calibre of matches that were on that weekend, this hilarious comedy match between these four wrestlers, two of them who were debuting, became like Rippy favourites for that weekend. And that only happens when a lot of care and attention is put behind the booking. And it takes months and months of discussion and going back and forth and thinking, and like when I say I'm involved in all these different things as a business, the thing I'm like, I don't want to touch creative, I don't want to touch the booking. I personally honestly don't have an interest in it. It's very finicky work. But yeah, I definitely trust in Josh and Tom, and I trust in their booking, that I'm just going to market it accordingly and appropriately. Wrestling is supposed to be a variety show. I think something that was very important for me to learn as a fan, that I think other fans can take on board, is that this whole show, the whole 2 or 3 hours or however long the show is, it's not all for you.
Yeah.
But that you would hope that more than half of it would be for you. And that means that there needs to be a blend of technical and basic and comedy and dramatic and arty, weird. Cara Noir just brought out a bike. What is happening? I don't know. Music started playing. I don't know. It's great, but I love it. There needs to be a blend of that, because at the end of the day, I want to go home happy. So it's really important for wrestling shows to be variety. But I think a well-represented show is a show that everyone will enjoy through the variety of it.
Right, well, we're gonna end pretty much in a minute. But the reason I'm at Rippy headquarters today is that you, Justine, have helped organise a quiz today.
Yes.
A Riptide quiz down at Loading Bar. Who have been pretty supportive of Riptide so far, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Loading Bar have been amazing.
I feel guilty I've not been in there yet. But I've been meaning to, I swear.
Well, you will today. You will today.
Yeah. But because of the quiz, I've got a little special pitch for you. Because sometimes in this podcast, I ask Josh or Tom or whoever.
Okay.
We're pitching characters, and I've given you a concept.
Okay.
Because it's a quiz, I want some sort of smart character. Have a minute to think. I'll put this on pause. I'll go to the loo. I want a character's wrestling name, wrestling theme song, and finishing move. And it's got to tie into being intelligent in some manner.
Okay.
Right, so our fantasy wrestling character here. What have you got for an intelligentsia?
Okay. So her name is Respectful Rebecca. And her finishing move is that she politely asks people to leave the ring.
A clever way for a count-out victory.
And you would assume that there would be a lot of lead-up to each match.
Yes.
And whether or not she has some dirt on people or she's blackmailing people behind the scenes. But on the outside, to all the fans, she seems like a very lovely young woman who's very kind and but for some reason when she politely asks people to leave the ring, they're like, yep, see you later, and then they get out the ring.
Very good. And you have you got a theme song?
I don't have a theme song.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, as soon as you said the name, I think it's got to be RESPECT.
Oh, yeah.
Bit of Aretha.
That would be amazing. RESPECT, Rebecca!
Well, mine feels a bit rubbish compared to that. Everyone's heard of Booker T. This is Booker Smarty. His theme song is going to be the Big Bang Theory theme song.
Okay.
Not that it's a very intelligent show; it's an awful show. But you know, the crowd will at least know the theme song. And his finishing move is called "This Will Learn 'Em." And all it is, he puts you in a sleeper and then he whispers in your ear the periodic table.
Oh, yeah, that would put me to sleep.
Yeah. But I've got to say, out of the two, I'd be much more excited to see Respectful Rebecca.
Oh, I don't have a name for a finisher. Well,
Respect my authority.
Leave it in the comments, listener.
Thanks a lot for joining me for the podcast, though. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so that was a really fun little interview with Justine Colla, also very insightful, I think you'll agree. Since Justine mentioned that you can see her artwork on her Instagram and also she interacts with people on Twitter, I just thought I'd give you the handles for those, which is she uses Pasta Saucer for both of those. That's PASTA SAUCA, Pasta Saucer. As she mentioned, on Instagram you can go and scroll through and check out some of her wrestling art, and on Twitter she'll often answer any questions you may have about sort of marketing or wrestling, sort of share the knowledge, better the scene kind of vibe. I would just say don't necessarily bombard her with DMs or questions, just because Justine does have a day job and she's also then working for Riptide, and you know she also needs time for a personal life. But if you follow her on Twitter, you'll see that Justine occasionally says, hey, my DMs are open if you have any questions, or ask me on this, and that's clearly the moment when she's made time to answer any questions you may have. And of course, I suppose I should mention that the next Riptide show is on the 14th of March. It's a family show. It's the next Pride of Brighton show. Visit riptidewrestling.com to find out more about that, and I will bow on that note. So thanks for listening. You can also find myself on Twitter at u_total_cult. That's right, it's cult. Make sure you spell that word carefully. All right. Bye.